out, freak the funk out.
Say what?
Freak the funk out, freak the funk out.
Welcome to another conversation with Speech Freak Radio. We're here today with Emily Macklow.
Yes.
Yeah.
Hello.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Yeah. How would you like to start? What would you like to say?
There's so much to be said, isn't there?
Yeah.
I'd really like to talk about some of the main passions that I have. One of which is music, because that's my mother tongue, really. And I feel like that's such a powerful medium to bring people together.
Absolutely.
And that's another passion of mine, is community or you know, just the connections, facilitating connections between people, because I find that our way of life, especially in the Western so-called civilized societies, causes the individual to be quite isolated, you know, living in their own little house, maybe with their own family, and, you know, going to their job and coming back to their own little house. Whereas, really, we used to be in a tribal setting. No matter what color your skin is, if you trace that back far enough, that's our roots. And I think it's still in the human psyche and in the DNA that we need this kind of connection as human beings. So I'm quite passionate about that. And that sort of segs right into another of my passions, which is mental health.
Do you think, so like, because I think that's what you said is both kind of related, like the communal aspect of it and the effect on the individual psyche, right?
Yes. Yes, I think it's all very related. And that's, when I consider mental health, there's a lot that's not in the current model of treating these issues.
Yes.
There's not a lot of exploration going into the causes of all these mental health issues that seem to be getting worse and worse.
Yeah, and it's interesting, right? Because any mental health issue is not like diagnosing a broken bone, you know, which has like a straight medical, physical, like it's all just a
well, you can
physical
see it, it's
equation.
visual. It's visual, you can see the crack through an x-ray.
Yeah.
Yeah. Whereas these issues, when we speak of mental health, it's hidden. And it's not so easily identifiable. You can't just get your finger and go, there it is, that's the issue. This is what needs to be done, this is what needs to be treated. But there's a model that's in use. And I'm quite familiar with it because of my husband, who was diagnosed with bipolar disorder, as it's called. And I lost him to suicide 3 years ago, which is huge, and has certainly fueled my passion for making sure that people are adequately cared for. And I feel that there are wonderful people in positions of care, including in the traditional medical, pharmaceutical kind of system, which is heavily psychiatry-based. There are good people there, really caring. But I don't think they've been adequately trained to understand the complexities and the alternative ways of viewing it and also treating it. And there are a lot of people who've done wonderful work in this area, like Gabor Mate. I don't know if you've heard of him.
Yeah.
He's done a lot of work on the relationship of trauma and addiction. And there are all sorts of others.
Yeah.
Wonderful. There's a documentary, I can't remember what it was called, but something about I won't mention it because I can't remember it. But there's a lot out there that for those who are open-minded enough to look at alternative ways of addressing these issues,
But it is kind of interesting, yeah, because the Western psychiatric tradition has been the model for so long, and like psychotherapy with pharmaceutical drugs, that like all these alternatives which are there and like have been around for a while, have a hard time kind of getting into the mainstream of psychology, right? Yeah.
Yes, definitely. And part of it I do understand is funding issues. So for me, even just going through the grief after losing someone so close to me to suicide, that was a tremendous, difficult mental health issue that I had. Getting through that, not that I'm totally through it. I mean, this is a lifelong process we're talking about.
Absolutely.
But I know that a lot of these therapies that I would have really loved to be able to make use of, I couldn't afford. So there's those troubles as well. But so I'd really like to call on our government to come in there and financially support people to be able to also utilize these. So I was given counseling, free counseling, grief counseling, which was wonderful and helpful. But it was like 6 sessions and then that's it. And there's some therapies that I can get a little tiny bit, maybe $60 a week funding for to be able to use, but it's not enough. And also, like we were talking about, the isolation that people experience, I think that's a big part that we need to look at. We need to look at issues that go deeper and beyond the surface of what presents when people are having mental health crises.
Yeah. Absolutely, because what do you think is missing from the model? Because just going back to like the origins of the Western psychological tradition, I would say Carl Jung was like one of the first to acknowledge the subconscious and the archetypal nature of our psychology. Do you think there is a understanding of the spiritual level of mental health, let's say?
Yes, and I think that's largely missing in our Western way of looking at things. I really respect the indigenous culture's way of looking at and dealing with these sorts of things. For instance, somebody who's, say, schizophrenic is not seen as someone who's needing to be fixed and is broken or out of order, but actually they're seen as somebody who has a special link to the spiritual. They're able to see things that the rest of us aren't able to see in that way. And so they're given really wonderful support. So they're put into the care of a medicine man or woman, somebody who is a shaman. Yes, somebody who is able to really take them on and help them to discover what it is that they have been gifted with. It's not seen as an illness or, something that reduces their value, but actually it's seen as something that increases their value. They're special and needed by the rest of us. They have something. They have a special superpower, and they're also supported so that they're able to feel safe and given the tools they need to be able to use this and understand it and have a relationship with it. And not given drugs to, just kind of sedate them. But on the other hand, I understand, because I was one, I understand the distress of families who don't know how to support their loved one and see them, it does give a feeling of being really unsafe, and you just want your loved one to be safe. You want everyone around them to be safe. And so I think it's really important that this model of support, of close kind of mentoring is there for a person who has this special power.
Yeah, exactly. And like, this goes back to what you said about like the communal aspect of it, because the shaman has a specific role within the tribe
Yes.
that only they could fulfill.
Yes. Yes.
And so it works harmoniously with the rest of the tribal family,
Of the
right?
community, yeah.
Yeah.
And that's important because without that tribal, the environment, it doesn't really have the same application either.
Yeah.
So,
So now another aspect of it which you touched on is the pharmaceutical aspect of it, right? I'm not sure if you saw this article about there was a Native American shaman who went into a psychiatric ward where patients were kind of sedated and all that stuff, and he could see spirits that wanted to communicate with the person, with the patient, but couldn't. They were blocked,
right.
So I think, the pharmaceutical aspect is a big part of it. What are your thoughts on how that interacts with it?
Yes, I think I'm not anti-pharmaceutical drugs. I don't put them in one big basket that I just think needs to be dumped in the rubbish. I think they have their place. My thoughts on it are that really I would like to see them be a last port of call instead of the first port of call that they are right now. You go to the crisis center when there's a mental health crisis and you're triaged and you're put into the care of a psychiatrist, and many of them are wonderful, like I said. Wonderful people who have, their hearts are in the right place. But what they've been trained in is to then, there's this book that's I've been told, and I'm not an expert on this, but is getting thicker and thicker all the time. And it's the diagnosis. The diagnostic manual.
DSM,
and so, that's their job. They try to take the person's symptoms and look at all that they're telling them and what's presenting before them, and they have to find where that is. And in this diagnostic manual, there's all the drugs to use, and there's quite a cocktail, and there are different ones you can try. But that's what it is. That's what's in the manual. Not, let's look into there's a little bit of this, looking into possible allergies, dietary problems, or possible thyroid or other physical ailments. There's a little bit of that in there as well. But the big chunk of it is to give them a cocktail of pharmaceuticals to address the issues that are presenting. Give them a diagnosis first, and then the accompanying pharmaceutical.
Isn't it also fucked up that the DSM is like an international standard? It's not like localized, it's like this blanket standard all over the world.
And I do understand there's a lot has gone into that, but I think we also need to be aware of the conflict of interests that are in the pharmaceutical
industrial complex
at large. Whether it's mental health issues, vaccinations, there's antibiotics. There's a lot that we need to be aware that there are corporations who are making massive financial gain from our use of this. And keeping us sick. Keeping us sick, and keeping us in the mindset that their pharmaceuticals are the solution to
They're the
a
saviors.
variety of maladies.
Yeah.
Whereas I want to call on people to have an open mind and look at alternative methods and means of treating these, whether it's mental health or other physical ailments.
Yeah.
I mean, this is a big issue we're
Yeah.
talking
Yes.
about, but it is the Western prescribed
It
method.
is, and what's interesting about is like the pharmaceuticals when it comes to like mental health, let's say, doesn't work the same for every individual,
No,
right?
that's right.
So that has to say something about there's something off in the model here, you know?
Yeah.
And like what you said in terms of individual cases, a lot of the times, if you look at it like holistically, let's say, it might be just something in their diet or something in their sleep pattern or something like, you know, else that is
Yes,
affecting,
or trauma.
yeah,
It's trauma.
or trauma,
That they haven't worked through.
yeah,
And yeah, so there's a whole lot, and that's exactly the word, holistic. That's what I think we need to really be striving towards, and wanting to support people and care for people and bring them to a place of their needs really being met. It needs to be looked at holistically.
What do you think is the first step with that?
Well, it's a big thing.
Or is there many
It's a big
steps?
thing. I think there are a lot of steps.
Yeah.
Because a lot of it also has to do with sort of deconstructing what's been built up
Yeah.
with such power and might.
Yeah.
You know.
And money.
And money, yeah.
Huge.
Like it's huge. But I do think that, and that's what I've called the Happy Bus Project. So I've got a colorful bus called the Happy
nice.
Bus.
Yeah.
And I think that on a grassroots level, this can also sort of cracks can be made in this big system by simply going to the people
Yeah.
and making space available for people to feel safe and be able to talk and understand that they're not alone in their struggle, that they can be heard, really heard.
Yeah.
Not in the way of, okay, here's my diagnostic manual, tick, yep. You know, but actually seen as an individual and heard and listened to. And also, because as I said, my other passions are music and bringing people together, I think they really do interweave beautifully, because if people can feel supported in a community,
Yeah.
you know, in a place where they feel safe among others, I think there's more of a chance that they can start to feel supported. And, you know, I don't have the answers, and for me this is just in its very initial stages, but there are a group of us who are wanting to take not just the Happy Bus, but take something on the road and go to small communities and bring an offering. For instance, my offering would probably be music.
Yeah.
And bringing, you know, getting people singing together and just facilitating a real feeling of connection. And Tessa McKenzie, I don't know if you know her, but she's another one who's with me on this, wanting to go on sort of really a pilgrimage in a way, like a caravan, going to communities, bringing our offering, but also receiving what they have, because every community has their own insight and their own lived experience. And so taking what they have and then being able to, what we have to give becomes broader and richer, being able to then take more to the next community, and just start to just get the conversation started, really.
Yeah, I think that's a great way to approach it, actually, because there's no way, or it would take a lot to go from the top down.
I think so too. Yeah, to try to approach it, politically, and to get in there and change the laws. I think that is a way, but I think that will take a lot longer.
Yeah.
And really, people are dying of suicide right now.
Yeah.
And it's just too many. The statistics are overwhelming.
It's really
something.
high.
It's desperate.
Yeah.
And urgent, and we can't just wait for it to, kind of filter down from the top and finally kind of get right.
Yeah, exactly.
So I feel like, and I feel like that about many issues. We as the people, we need to realize our power. That we are powerful when we decide something together, and we can just get things started on a grassroots
Yeah, absolutely.
level.
The mainstream and the system, they just talking and it's not happening.
It's
Yeah,
not. No.
yeah.
And-
yeah.
and-
There's a lot of like when you go into the political realm and the corporate realm, it's a lot of bureaucratic walls.
Yeah,
You
and
know?
red tape. Yeah, and it just
Yeah.
takes too long. And there was the mental health inquiry that the government just recently did, and I was involved in that. I gave my submission, and I was part of the little panel that met for it. And I think it's wonderful they had that inquiry. But I also think that it's just too slow. It's too slow, and I think the will might be there.
Yeah.
But the ability and means to make it happen quickly is, like you said,
It's not happening.
It's just the bureaucracy behind it is.
Yeah.
It's really hampering.
Let's
I
get
have my tea, by the way.
yes. Let's get a bit esoteric, because I think this leads into what you said in terms of the suicide rate being really high. There's multiple mental health issues. I think and you do environmental activism as well.
Yes, I do.
So I think, what do you think in terms of there may be like a collective crisis of consciousness, right?
Mhm.
That is
Absolutely.
kind of having all these anomalous effects on really all over the world.
Yes.
And in terms of how that may be related to what's going on with Gaia and the whole big picture.
Yes. Well, I think you've said it really. Well, it's all interrelated, and I've been involved in Extinction Rebellion, which is a relatively new group that I really enjoy and respect the immediacy of action that this group has.
Didn't you guys make like national headlines for what you did at Simon Burgess's office?
We did. a simple action of pouring,
Yeah.
it was basically maple syrup or something.
Yeah.
down his steps. Well, yeah, because I agree. There's a whole lot that is really unwell and unhealthy in human beings' attitude towards our beautiful, precious Papatunuku, our earth, our planet, our one and only home in this whole vast universe. This is our home. And yet I say we because It is a collective thing, even though
Yeah.
it's run and, the charge is the corporations that through greed are making a lot of profit out of being this way, but really we're all involved because we're viewing our home as this vast resource that we can plunder at will and, just take without regard to the consequences and what that's doing.
Yeah.
And yet now it's really becoming more and more clear, and more voices are being raised to say, hey, we're headed for a massive global crisis here,
Yeah.
and we've got to do something drastic, or we're very close to the point of no return as far as global warming.
Yeah.
And
like
the
climate
massive,
change.
just the chain of reaction that's setting
Yeah.
off, which has already been set off.
Yeah.
But we're basically Extinction Rebellion is one of the groups, but there are many who
Oh,
are,
yeah, yeah.
activist
Yeah.
groups who are standing up and saying, hey, it's not too late yet if we act now, but we've got to act drastically. But again, bureaucratic
It's-
walls
yeah.
are in the way, and corporate greed, because
Yeah, exactly.
it's
Yeah.
the fabric of the industrial corporate society is built on that foundation.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
And-
it's a big
and-
thing. It's a
and-
big call to say, hey,
And like also like making things bigger, better, cheaper, faster, all that stuff, which unfortunately there is a consumer demand for. If that consumer demand, I mean, obviously it was engineered to be this way in terms of consumer society, but if that were to disappear, then all this kind of chasing of profits would also dial back.
that's
But
right. So again, we come back
Yeah.
down to the grassroots level
Yeah.
and to the power of the people. We can't wait for the corporations and governments to make the massive changes that need to
Yeah.
be made, although we are calling on them,
Yeah.
and we need to call on them because they are responsible. They're responsible to make these changes.
But another thing is that I don't think that that deals with corporations are the way to go, because let's say there's a carbon tax, right, which is kind of what the Paris climate thing was about, right? If they wanted to go above the allowed CO2 levels, they would just need to pay more, and so they can just pay to the governments makes more money and they get to pollute anyway, so what the hell.
It didn't work.
It's not, yeah.
No, but like you said, the connection is there between the well-being of Gaia and the well-being of all those who depend on her.
Yeah.
And the correlations are definitely there.
Yeah, because there's always it's like as above so below, esoteric and exoteric. You will feel, even if it's at a deep subconscious level, that unease that's going on,
Exactly.
within the world, and
Yeah.
and that can lead to all these kind of anomalies that are happening.
Yes.
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 And especially, I think, what do you think of the psychological and spiritual impact of the COVID situation?
That's a big one too.
Yeah, because I think that's this is something that has never happened in the history of the world, really, where the world shuts down for
On
a
such a
few.
global scale.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, part of me is encouraged because I can see that it's possible.
Mm.
And there is a certain shutdown that needs to happen. That we could shut down all air travel to this extent. That's huge.
Yeah.
It is possible. Where there's a will,
Yeah.
actually we can do it. So there's that positive spin on it that I can see. But I do think that if we backtrack in our conversation back to the of our Western society, certainly COVID and the need to retreat into our isolated pockets has certainly exacerbated that. And for me, I have the privilege of having a good home and good people in my home, but for many that's not the case. And having financial support from, it was okay for me. But I know that many people, it was not okay. They weren't safe in their homes.
Yeah.
And I really felt for them. Here I was safe, but I could feel I could feel for those who weren't safe, and
internationally, all over the world.
yes,
Strange social consequences.
yes. So we don't really know. This is like a huge, massive human experiment, and we don't know what the results are going to be.
Yeah, we really don't.
We don't know.
Because it's so recent and fresh,
Yeah, but that's where talking about the environmental, just awful crisis that we're in, again, I feel that the indigenous people who are still connected to Papatūānuku, connected to the environment, and understand how everything is interconnected. We can't separate, for instance, the resources of the earth from our well-being, and we can't separate. I can't separate my well-being from your well-being, really, because we're all so interconnected. And indigenous cultures they've preserved this understanding, whereas the Western civilized nations have come a long way from that. And so I feel that we need to turn and really listen to those peoples who still understand this. I feel that they're the ones who can lead us back to wellness and wholeness, both environmentally and mentally and socially.
Yeah, I think so. Because I think that in terms of my opinion on where I see things going is that, like, the grand narrative is kind of breaking down into all these new sub-narratives, right? Which are exaggerated by the internet and by technology in general. So eventually what's going to need to happen is all these new sub-narratives, I think along with ancient narratives, let's say, are going to need to be synthesized into a new grand narrative.
I agree.
Because I think there's great aspects of Western civilization in terms of technology. In terms of just transportation and all kinds of
many innovations. We can't back up.
No.
And we don't want to.
Yeah. So I think what we're going to need to do is take the best of that and integrate it with the best of ancient wisdom.
Yes. And create a new narrative.
And create a new narrative.
Yes.
I don't know, if or when that could happen, what that's going to look like. But it's interesting to speculate.
It is.
Yeah.
It is interesting, and I feel like it needs to become more than interesting. It needs to become.
Yeah.
Well, we just need to understand and wake up to the urgent nature of the situation we're in right now.
Yeah.
Right now, and I feel that we're here because we're meant to be here right now.
Exactly.
And I think if each person could acknowledge that they're on this planet at this time, maybe we could open up to the possibility of what our individual role could be. And, you know, and
Yeah.
just to stop being in the
Matrix.
matrix, the rat race, you know, it is hard to survive, you know, it keeps us in that mold and in that isolation.
Yeah.
Because it is
Lower
hard.
frequency.
Yeah, well, it's hard, you know,
Yeah.
you need to make money and pay these bills and you know, maintain this lifestyle. It is hard. And so to be able to break out enough to look at the bigger picture is already quite a struggle.
Yeah, exactly. And that's why a lot of people don't even want, are I guess, hesitant to kind of go outside of their consciousness bubble and see, you know, the bigger picture. But yeah, I think eventually it's going to be inevitable.
I think so too, and sadly but truly, history has shown us that the most effective way for large societies and cultures to change massively is through crisis.
Yeah.
I'm sorry and sad to say it, and I wish we were smarter and we didn't wait until crisis to change, but that's what brings it about. That's what
history
will
has
cause
shown,
it to
yeah.
come. And that's where we're headed right now. We're headed towards crises,
Yeah.
even just environmental crises.
Yeah, I think it's multifaceted in terms of the crisis.
I do too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In terms of all the struggle for freedom across the world, all the riots that are going on pre and post COVID,
Yes.
around the world. I think there's if we're not in it already, we're definitely
We're headed towards
headed towards something.
Yes.
You know.
But there's also beautiful, positive
Oh yeah, absolutely.
ways of looking at this. Like if you take
Yeah.
things, any environmental disaster, even just take here in our own country, the Christchurch earthquakes, for instance, it brings out the best in people.
Yeah.
You know, when
Yeah.
faced with such an awful, traumatic crisis, humans tend to pull together.
Yeah.
And differences that maybe separated them before that, they just fall away.
It's ego dissolving.
It is. It's
Yeah.
ego dissolving, and you know, and the care. It just encourages me and gives me hope about our race. that there's care and goodness at the heart of most people.
Yeah.
And crisis will bring that out. You know, there's all these sort of futuristic science fiction narratives about how crisis is going to bring out the worst in people,
Dystopian,
looting and just wanting to survive will cause them to kill others.
It's like Mad Max style,
Yeah. We don't know.
we
don't know. But my hope and actually my belief is that humans will pull together and find a way through together. So.
That's a great note to end on.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Let it be happy.
Thank you very much, Emily. That was a great conversation. I think we went all over the place, but we kept it connected.
Yeah. Thank you for inviting me to talk.
Awesome. Cheers, guys. Catch you next time.
Freak the funk out.
Say what?